It's 3 a.m. You're staring at the ceiling. Your phone is face down because you promised yourself you wouldn't check it. But the real answer to why you're awake right now is far stranger than blue light or stress. It's older than houses, older than fire even. It's written into your body by a million years of nights spent in the dark, waiting. You think insomnia is a modern disease. It isn't. Your ancestors knew this hour intimately. They had a name for it, though not in words you'd recognize. They called it the watch. Here's the strange part. For most of human history, sleeping straight through the night wasn't normal. It was the exception. Historian A. Roger E. Kirch spent over a decade combing through diaries, court records, and medical texts from pre-industrial Europe, and he found something that should change how you think about your own 3 a.m. People didn't sleep in one block, they slept in two. First sleep, then an hour or two of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the night, then second sleep until dawn. That middle hour had a name, the watch. Some called it the first sleep and the morrow sleep. During the watch, people didn't panic. They didn't reach for a screen because there was no screen to reach for. They prayed. They talked quietly with whoever shared the bed. Some got up and tended the fire. Some had sex. Some just lay there, thinking, in a state that researchers now believe may have been genuinely useful for memory and emotional processing. So if you've ever woken at 3 a.m. convinced something is wrong with you, here's the twist. Nothing is wrong with you. Your body might be doing exactly what it was built to do. The wrongness is the modern expectation that you should sleep 8 unbroken hours like a light switching off and on. Why would a body evolve to wake up in the middle of the night on purpose? Doesn't that sound dangerous? This is where it gets stranger, because waking briefly in the night wasn't a flaw in the system. It might have been the system working correctly. Picture where your ancestors actually slept, not in a locked bedroom with a deadbolt and a security system. In the open or in shelters made of branches and hide, surrounded by darkness that actually meant something. Darkness that could contain a predator, a rival group, a fire spreading from a neighboring camp. A brain that slept too deeply, for too long, without checking its surroundings, was a brain that didn't survive to pass itself on. Anthropologist Carol Worthman, who has spent decades studying sleep across different cultures, including hunter-gatherer groups like the Hadza of Tanzania, found something that contradicts almost everything you've been told about healthy sleep. These groups don't sleep in one solid block either. Their sleep is fragmented, flexible, responsive to sound, temperature, and the rhythms of the people around them. And by every measure that matters, they're not walking around exhausted. They're not diagnosed with insomnia, because insomnia as a disorder requires a fixed standard of normal sleep to fail at. And fragmented sleep, in their world, is the standard. Read that again. Fragmented sleep is the standard. Unbroken sleep is the anomaly. So somewhere between your ancestors' firelit nights and your bedroom right now, the rules changed. What actually happened? The answer involves a technology so common you don't even think of it as technology anymore. Artificial light. Before cheap, reliable lighting, night was long. In the winter, in much of the world, darkness could stretch for 14, 15 hours. No human alive could spend 15 straight hours unconscious. So sleep stretched to fill the available darkness, broken into 2 segments with a window of rest in between. Almost like 2 short naps bridging one long night. Historian Craig Koslowski, who has written extensively on the cultural history of nighttime in early modern Europe, describes how night itself was treated differently before artificial light made it controllable. Darkness was a separate world with its own customs, its own dangers, its own permissions. People feared it, structured their lives around avoiding too much exposure to it, and yet within that fear, they built quiet rituals for the hours they were forced to spend awake inside it. Then came gaslighting, then electric light, and the night, for the first time in the history of our species, became something you could simply switch off whenever you wanted, and switch back on whenever you wanted. Darkness stopped being long and became optional. As artificial light spread through cities and homes, the long dark night that used to make room for 2 sleeps and a watch in between started shrinking. Bedtimes got later, wake times got earlier. The watch, that quiet hour of wakeful rest, didn't fit into a shorter night anymore, so it got squeezed out, treated as wasted time instead of a normal part of rest. But your biology didn't get the memo. The circuitry that used to wake you gently in the dark, expecting conversation or firelight, or a slow drift back into second sleep, is still there, still doing its job. Except now, when it wakes you at 3 a.m., there's no fire to tend and no one to talk to in the dark. Just a quiet room, a racing mind, and the modern belief that something has gone wrong. This is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The anxiety you feel about waking at 3 a.m. might be doing more damage than the waking itself. Sleep researchers have found that the distress about being awake, the checking the clock, the spiraling thoughts about tomorrow's exhaustion activates the same stress response your ancestors needed for actual danger. Except there's no predator. There's just you, your phone face down on the nightstand, and a body that thinks it's 1500 AD and is simply waiting for the fire to need more wood. Psychologist Russell Foster, who studies circadian rhythms and their relationship to mental health, has pointed out that the modern framing of sleep as a single, uninterrupted block creates a kind of manufactured failure. If you wake at 3 a.m. and panic, you're not responding to a malfunction. You're responding to a mismatch between an ancient, sensible biological pattern and a relatively new cultural expectation that didn't exist for most of the time humans have been sleeping. So, what did ancient humans actually do during the watch? They didn't fight it. That's the part worth sitting with. They didn't reach for anything to force themselves back under. They let the wakefulness be wakefulness. Quiet talk, small tasks, prayer in many traditions was specifically tied to this hour, a kind of built-in cultural permission to be awake without judging yourself for it. The watch had a function, it had a name, it had dignity. Compare that to how you experience the same hour now. Phone light, racing thoughts about an email you haven't sent. The specific dread of doing the math on how many hours of sleep you have left before the alarm. None of that existed for the person lying awake by firelight 1,000 years ago. Not because their life was easier, but because their relationship to that hour was completely different. They expected it. You don't. There's a deeper layer to this too, one that connects to something even older than separated sleep segments. Some anthropologists have proposed that light sleep itself, the kind where you're drifting, but still semi-aware of sound and movement around you, may have been the ancestral default for much of human evolutionary history, especially in environments shared with predators or rival groups. Deep, fully unconscious sleep for hours on end might be a luxury that only became possible once humans built walls, locked doors, and eventually city grids with streetlights. Your 3 a.m. wakefulness might be your nervous system quietly reverting to a much older, more vigilant setting the moment the conditions of true safety, however illusory, start to waver, which raises an uncomfortable question. Is your insomnia actually broken sleep, or is it your oldest, most patient survival system gently reminding you it never fully retired? You don't have to answer that at 3 a.m. That's actually the worst time to interrogate yourself about anything. But it might explain why lying there trying to force unconsciousness through sheer willpower so often backfires. You're not malfunctioning. You're listening to an old watch, the kind your ancestors used to keep, except now there's no fire, no companion stirring beside you, no community rhythm to fold the wakefulness into. Just you and a culturally invented standard of sleep that is, historically speaking, barely 2 centuries old. So the next time you wake at 3 a.m., you might try something different. Not panic, not the phone. Just stillness and the strange comfort of knowing that you are doing something your ancestors did every single night of their lives. You are keeping the watch. Tonight, when you finally close your eyes, you're not switching off a machine. You're stepping into a rhythm older than language, older than agriculture, older than the idea that a full night should ever have been unbroken in the first place. And if you wake again in the dark, hours before the alarm, remember, the real answer to why isn't a malfunction. It never was.